I stood in the courtroom, looking straight into the eyes of the woman who'd raised me for the past 3 years. Those green eyes, once sparkling like emeralds at lavish parties, were now as cold as ice. She was no longer the elegant Aunt Eleanor with her Chanel dresses and radiant smile. No, today, Eleanor Pierce sat there in an orange prison jumpsuit, her perfect blonde hair now showing dark roots, and not a trace of makeup hid her true face. Olivia. She whispered as they led her from the courtroom, "You'll regret this." I didn't feel scared. Not anymore. I just felt relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. I looked down at my hands, no longer trembling. 3 years ago, I was a terrified 16-year-old, trapped in a game whose rules I didn't understand. Now, at 19, I'd put my parents' murderer behind bars. My parents. They deserved justice. Do you know what it's like when everything in your life is a lie? When the person you trusted most is the one who destroyed it all. I do. And this is the story of how I not only survived, but how I brought down one of the most sophisticated killers Boston had ever seen, the woman everyone called the Angel of Beacon Hill. But to understand this story, we have to go back to before I knew the truth. Before I discovered Aunt Eleanor had planned to murder my parents on that yacht. Before I knew about the $30 million my parents had left behind. Before I realized that accident was no accident at all. I grew up in a modest clapboard house on the outskirts of Boston. My parents, Dr. James and Rebecca Morgan, came from incredibly wealthy families, but they'd chosen a different path. My father was a pediatrician at a community clinic in Dorchester. My mother was an art professor at a public college. Money was never their goal. Liv, my father often said when I complained about not getting the latest phone. A person's true worth isn't in what you own, but in who you love and the good you do for the world. I didn't fully appreciate that philosophy until I was 15. I was sitting in class when I overheard Mackenzie Williams, the daughter of an NBA star, telling her friends if my parents made me wear clothes from Target, I'd rather die. They all shrieked with laughter as if it were the funniest thing in the world, while Emily Vasquez, the girl wearing clothes from Target, sat right next to them, trying to become invisible. That was the moment I realized my parents were right. They'd raised me better. Maybe I didn't have an expensive wardrobe, but I had a conscience. And that was something all the money in the world couldn't buy. That was also the moment everything started to change, though I didn't know it at the time. My parents started talking about Aunt Eleanor more. Eleanor Pierce, my mother's sister, who had chosen a completely different path in life. She was a successful businesswoman, owned a luxury real estate firm, and lived in a Beacon Hill mansion. She represented everything my parents rejected: opulence, materialism, and status. Eleanor wants to see you, my mother said at dinner one night. She's hosting a trip on her yacht to Cape Cod this weekend and wants us to come. I don't even remember what she looks like, I said. The truth was, I'd only met Eleanor a few times in my life, and the last time was when I was about 8. It's time to change that, my father said, his voice strangely strained. There are family matters we need to discuss. I noticed the look that passed between my parents, a look I couldn't decipher then, but which I now understand was fear. We set off for the marina on Saturday morning. The first time I saw Eleanor's yacht, I was stunned. It wasn't a boat, it was a floating palace. The siren's call, the name inscribed in gold lettering on its hull, was at least 120 feet long and gleamed under the summer sun. And then I saw Eleanor. She stood on deck in a simple white dress that looked deceptively plain, but I was sure cost thousands. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her tan flawless, and her smile the brightest I'd ever seen. "Rebecca," she cried, waving at my mother. "James. And this must be Olivia. Oh my God, look how you've grown." She glided down the gangway, the scent of expensive perfume wafting off her as she hugged us. I couldn't help but notice the contrast between our casual clothes and her glamorous appearance. "I can't believe I finally convinced you to come," Eleanor said to my mother. "How long has it been? 2 years? 3? Life gets so busy when you're expanding the company into the European market." While my parents carried our luggage onto the yacht, Eleanor pulled me aside. "Olivia," she said, her eyes appraising me from head to toe, "I have some special gifts for you in your cabin. I think it's time we started making up for what you've missed." "I don't think I've missed anything," I replied, suddenly feeling defensive. "My parents gave me everything I needed." Eleanor laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Oh, sweetie, there are things you don't even know you need until you have them." She patted my shoulder. "But that's what this weekend is for, to get acquainted." As the boat pulled away from the dock, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. My cabin on the yacht was unbelievably luxurious, a huge bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, a private bathroom with a marble shower, and a large porthole overlooking the ocean. On the bed were carefully wrapped gift boxes with Gucci, Prada, and Louis Vuitton logos. I have to admit, For a moment, I was mesmerized by all the opulence. But then I remembered my parents' words and decided to leave the boxes untouched. We had a lavish lunch on deck, fresh seafood, expensive wine for the adults, and what seemed like overly formal stories about rich people I'd never heard of. I noticed my parents looked uncomfortable. My father kept glancing at his watch. "James," Eleanor said, pouring more wine, "are you still sure about your decision? There's still time to change your mind." "We've discussed this, Eleanor," my father said, his voice firm. "The answer is still no." "No to what?" I wondered. What were they talking about? Around 3 p.m., the weather started to change. The clear blue sky suddenly turned gray, and the wind began to pick up. The captain, a tall man named Captain Miller, came to speak quietly with Eleanor. "Looks like we're in for a bit of a squall," she announced. "Nothing to worry about. But it's best if we head below for an hour or two." Just then, I started to feel violently seasick. The waves were higher, and the boat began to rock more aggressively. "I don't feel well," I told my mother, my stomach churning. "Go down to your cabin and lie down for a bit," my mother said, patting my hand. "We'll check on you later." I stumbled below deck, into my cabin, and collapsed onto the bed. The world spun around me, and I closed my eyes, trying to control the nausea. Eventually, I drifted into an uneasy sleep. I don't know how long I slept. When I woke, the boat had stopped rocking. I looked out the window and saw we were docked. It was dark, the lights of the marina twinkling in the blackness. I quickly brushed my hair and went up on deck, expecting to find my parents. But instead, I only saw Eleanor standing there, a sorrowful look on her face, talking to a police officer. "This is her," she said when she saw me. "Olivia, sweetie, come here. Where are Mom and Dad?" I asked, a strange dread rising in my chest. "Oh, Olivia," Eleanor sighed, her eyes welling up. "There was a terrible accident. When the storm hit, the waves were so strong. Your parents, they were swept overboard. My world collapsed." "No," I whispered. No. "It can't be." "I'm so sorry, kid," the police officer said. "We've sent out search and rescue, but with these currents and the weather, they could still be alive." I screamed, tears streaming down my face. "We have to find them. Olivia." Eleanor squeezed my shoulder. "The best people are looking for them. But you need to prepare yourself for the worst. You'll come live with me now. I'll take care of you." The next 2 days passed in a painful daze. I stayed in Eleanor's Beacon Hill mansion, a lavish residence I barely noticed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I just sat by the window, looking out at the bay, and prayed for a miracle. On the 3rd day, they found my parents' bodies. Eleanor came to my room, her makeup perfect even, as she delivered the worst possible news. "You don't have to identify them," she said softly. I already did. They weren't recognizable. I crumpled to the floor, grief tearing through me. I don't know how long I cried. But when I finally stopped, Eleanor was sitting beside me, stroking my hair. "I'll take care of everything," she said. "The funeral, the legal papers, everything. You don't have to worry about a thing. And here," she pushed an expensive designer bag towards me, "I bought you a black dress for the funeral." "I want to wear the dress Mom bought me for my birthday," I said. "It still smells like her." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That H&M dress?" "No, sweetie. We need to show respect. And besides," she stood up, smoothing her skirt, "I've already had your things cleared out of that house. Your closet is fully stocked with new things." I stared at her, horrified. "What did you do?" "Those were my personal belongings. And all of them were beneath you," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "You're a Morgan, Olivia. It's time you started dressing like one." The funeral was a huge affair, something my parents would have hated. Hundreds of people I didn't know flocked to a large Boston church. I sat in the front row in the sequined black dress Eleanor had forced me to wear, feeling like a doll on display. All I had left from my old life was Max, the Labrador retriever our family had adopted from a shelter. He was the only friend I could truly cry with. Every night, Max would jump onto my bed, rest his head on my lap, and sigh heavily, as if he understood my pain. Eleanor hated Max, always complaining about dog hair on her expensive furniture. But I was adamant about keeping him. My parents would want him with me, I said, and this time, I didn't back down. The week after the funeral, Eleanor started buying me gifts, each more extravagant than the last. Hermes bags, Louboutin shoes, even a BMW when I passed my driving test. I refused them at first, but she insisted it was her way of showing love. "Your parents rejected this life," she told me one night after too many martinis, "but you don't have to. You can have everything, Olivia. Everything they denied you." I started attending an expensive private school in Boston, where all the students were children of the rich and powerful. I hated it, hated how money was the measure of a person's worth. But I learned to fit in, wearing the masks Eleanor had bought for me. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after the accident, I was looking for Max. I'd searched the entire mansion, calling his name, but there was no familiar bark in response. That's when Eleanor walked in with a dog carrier, but inside wasn't Max. It was a fluffy white poodle. "Where's Max?" I asked, my heart rate picking up. "That mutt always made you sad," Eleanor said, opening the carrier to release the poodle. "He reminded you of the past." I had him taken away. "This is Chloe. I think she suits us much better." I'd never felt such rage before. "What did you do?" I screamed. "Max was my family. He was all I had left." "Don't use that tone with me," Eleanor snapped. "Max was taken to a good shelter. Don't be so dramatic." I ran to my room and locked the door, angry tears streaming down my face. I hated Eleanor. Hated all of this. I wanted my parents back. I wanted Max back. I wanted my life back. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard Eleanor's voice from her office downstairs. She was on the phone, her voice louder than usual. For some reason, I crept out of my room and went to the top of the stairs to listen. Of course I had to get rid of them. Eleanor's voice carried clearly. What they were doing was practically abuse. No girl should have to grow up in such poverty, especially with that inheritance. My heart stopped. Inheritance? I didn't know my parents had money. Imagine, Eleanor continued. Her voice now laced with a smug laugh, $30 million locked away in a trust, and they had her living in a dump, wearing clothes from Target. Such a waste. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Eleanor had killed my parents for money, and now she was controlling me and my fortune. It all suddenly became clear. The boat trip, the sudden storm, my parents being swept overboard while I was below deck. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. I slipped back into my room, closing the door softly. I sat on my bed, my whole body trembling. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard, but at the same time, I could. The little details, the tension between my parents and Eleanor on the boat, Captain Miller's strange look, the fact that no one had actually seen my parents fall overboard, it all started to connect. And Max. She'd probably killed Max too. I knew it in my gut. There was no shelter. Max was gone, just like my parents. I sat there all night sleepless, planning my next move. I knew I needed to escape, but I also needed proof. Proof to put Eleanor in jail. Proof of what she'd done to my parents, to Max, and maybe to others. The next morning, Eleanor walked into my room without knocking. She was already impeccably dressed, a cream-colored suit worth thousands, hair in a neat chignon, and a cool expression on her face. "We need to talk, Olivia," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I've arranged for you to attend a boarding school in Vermont." "A boarding school?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even though my heart was pounding. "But why?" "I'm doing fine here." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "Westfield Academy is one of the best schools on the East Coast. They have special support programs for students experiencing trauma. I think it will be good for you. Away from this place, with so many painful memories." I knew what this was. She was trying to get rid of me, keep me distant, isolated, so she could freely control the money. "When would I leave?" I asked, swallowing my fear. "This weekend," Eleanor replied, standing and smoothing her clothes. "I've already hired people to pack your things. This weekend." I had only 4 days to find proof and plan my escape. I needed to be smart, careful, and fast. After Eleanor left, I started searching for evidence. I began in her office, where I'd overheard that phone call. I waited until she left for a charity luncheon, and then snuck downstairs. Eleanor's office was an elegant room with dark oak furniture, expensive abstract art, and a large desk overlooking the garden. I started searching the desk drawers. Most held business papers. But in the bottom drawer, I found a folder labeled Morgan Family Trust. Hands trembling, I opened it. And there, on the first page, I saw it. Total current assets, $32,457,892.18. I nearly fell off the chair. My parents really had left a fortune. And according to the terms of the trust, I would gain full access to the money when I turned 21, 3 years from now. However, there was another clause that made my blood run cold. If I died before receiving the money, my guardian, currently Eleanor, would inherit everything. She had a motive to kill me. I quickly took photos of all the pages with the phone Eleanor had bought me. Luckily, she hadn't restricted the camera function. Then I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it. For the next 3 days, I became a private investigator. I searched the mansion whenever Eleanor was out. I rifled through drawers, checked the safe in her bedroom. I couldn't open it. And even searched the garage. I also started hoarding cash. I took money from Eleanor's purse when she wasn't looking, accidentally dropped a diamond bracelet and pocketed it. and even sold some of the expensive clothes she'd bought me to an online consignment store using a secret PayPal account I'd created. By the end of the week, I'd scraped together nearly $5,000. But it still wasn't enough proof. Until the night before I was supposed to leave. It was 2 a.m., and I was in the bathroom, a wreck with anxiety. I knew that once I got to that boarding school, I'd be completely isolated, and if Eleanor wanted me to have an accident, it would be much easier. That's when I heard voices from outside my bathroom window. My bathroom overlooked the back garden, where there was a small guest house Eleanor sometimes let business associates use. I turned off the light and peered out. There, standing in the shadows, were Eleanor and Captain Miller, the man from the yacht. They were arguing. "I need more money," I heard Miller say. "What happened on that boat? It haunts me. I can't sleep." We agreed on a sum. Eleanor snapped, "And I paid you double." "You signed a non-disclosure agreement." "That was before I knew the bodies would wash ashore," Miller said, his voice trembling. "Jesus, Eleanor. You told me it would look like an accident. You didn't say you'd. Do what?" Eleanor's voice was ice. "Be careful what you say next, Miller. Remember you're an accomplice here too." I only agreed to take the boat into rough waters and look the other way. "I didn't know you'd actually push them." I nearly cried out. "Push them." Eleanor had pushed my parents off the boat. "Keep your voice down," Eleanor ordered, glancing around the garden. "Get out of here. I'll wire another $50,000 to your account, but that's the last time. I don't want to hear from you again." "What about the girl?" Miller asked. "What are you going to do with her?" Eleanor shrugged. "She's off to boarding school tomorrow. A very remote, very unsupervised school. Depressed students, teenage suicides, they happen all the time. So sad." I clapped my hand over my mouth to stop a gasp. She was planning to kill me. Maybe not directly, but by creating the conditions for it to happen. I rushed back to my bedroom, hid my phone under my pillow, and pretended to be asleep. A few minutes later, I heard Eleanor's footsteps in the hallway. My door creaked open softly, and I sensed her standing there, watching me. I forced myself to breathe evenly and deeply. After a long moment, the door closed. As soon as I was sure she was gone, I shot out of bed and started planning. I couldn't go to that boarding school. I needed to run, tonight. I gently opened my bedroom window. My room was on the second floor, but there was a porch roof beneath the window I could climb onto. I quickly stuffed a backpack with a few basic clothes, all the cash I'd collected, my phone, charger, and the single photo of my parents I'd hidden under my mattress. Standing on the porch roof, I thought about the life I was leaving behind, a life of luxury with expensive clothes, gourmet food, and all the material comforts a person could want, but also a life with a murderer who had killed my parents for money and wouldn't hesitate to do the same to me. There was no choice. I climbed down carefully and ran across the lawn to the side gate at the back of the garden. Eleanor didn't know I'd found the spare key the previous week while I was searching for evidence. I unlocked the gate and slipped out. I was free. But free to go where? I was just a 16-year-old girl, alone on the streets of Boston at 3 a.m. I called a cab using an app and gave a random address in Cambridge. When the driver arrived, he looked concerned. "You okay, kid?" he asked. "Kinda late to be wandering around alone." "Yeah." I lied. "Just had a fight with my boyfriend. I just want to get home." The driver didn't look entirely convinced, but he drove me anyway. I stared out the window as we drove through the dark streets of Boston, not knowing where to go or what to do next. Then I thought of Ms. Martinez, my old art teacher from public school. She'd always been kind to me, always said I could talk to her about anything. Would she believe me? Would she help me? I changed the destination to Ms. Martinez's address in Jamaica Plain, an area I thankfully remembered from an old class field trip. When we arrived, I paid the driver and stood in front of a small apartment building. It was 3:30 a.m. Could I really wake her at this hour? I had no other choice. I buzzed her apartment and waited, heart pounding. No response. I pressed again, longer this time. Finally, a groggy voice came through the speaker. "Who is it? Ms. Martinez?" I almost whispered. It's me, Olivia Morgan." There was a long pause, then the sound of the door buzzing open. A mess. Martinez appeared in her pajamas, hair disheveled, her face etched with concern. "Olivia?" she gasped. "Oh my God, what are you doing here at this hour? Are you okay?" And right then, all my composure shattered. Tears streamed down my face as I told Ms. Martinez everything about my parents' deaths, about Eleanor, about what I'd overheard tonight, and about my fears. A mess. Martinez listened, her face growing paler as the story unfolded. When I finished, she hugged me tight. "I believe you," she said, "and we're going to figure this out. But first, you need to rest. You can stay here tonight, or what's left of it. Tomorrow, we'll go to the police. The next day, the world seemed to have gone mad. Eleanor had reported me missing to the police, and my face was on every local news channel. Missing teen, orphaned after parents' tragic death, believed to be suffering severe trauma. The headlines read, "A mess." Martinez and I watched the news in silence. "She's trying to make me look crazy," I said, furious. "So, if I show up with these accusations, no one will believe me." "That's why we need hard evidence," Ms. Martinez said. "You said you took pictures of the trust documents." I nodded and pulled out my phone, but when I opened the photo app, my heart sank. "They're gone," I whispered. "All the pictures I took, they're gone." "Could Eleanor access your phone account?" Ms. Martinez asked. "She bought it. She probably set it up so she could monitor and control it remotely." I wanted to scream. My only proof was gone. It was just my word against Eleanor's, a traumatized teenager versus a respected businesswoman known for her charity work. "We can still go to the police," Ms. Martinez said. But her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "They won't believe us," I said, feeling hopeless. "They'll send me back to her, and then..." I couldn't even finish the sentence. We both knew what would happen if I went back to Eleanor. "Captain Miller," Ms. Martinez said suddenly. "You said he took money from Eleanor, right? If we could find him. Convince him to tell the truth. But how do we find him?" I asked. "We don't even know his full name. Do you remember the name of the yacht?" "The Siren's Call," I answered immediately. "I'll never forget it." Then we start there. A yacht like that has to be registered somewhere. So does its captain. We spent the day searching for information on the Siren's Call. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of yachts with that name. But eventually, we identified one that matched my description, registered under a shell company linked to one of Eleanor's businesses. From there, we found registration details, including the captain's name, Captain Thomas Miller. "Bingo," Ms. Martinez whispered when we found his address in Gloucester. A coastal town an hour north of Boston. "What are we going to do?" I asked. "We can't just drive up there and knock on his door." Ms. Martinez looked at me, her eyes determined. "That's exactly what we're going to do. But we won't go alone." She called a friend, a lawyer named Michael Chin, who specialized in civil cases. She didn't tell him the whole story over the phone, just that it was a serious matter involving the safety of a former student. Chin agreed to meet us and listen. Half an hour later, he arrived at Ms. Martinez's apartment. He was a serious-looking middle-aged man with prematurely graying hair and sharp eyes. I told the whole story again, trying not to miss any details. When I finished, Chin sat quietly for a moment. Thinking, "Do you have any proof?" he finally asked. "No," I admitted. There were photos of the trust documents, but they were wiped from my phone. "And what I overheard, it's just my word." "Captain Miller is the key," Ms. Martinez said. "If we can get him to talk." "It's a long shot," Chin said. "And if Eleanor Pierce is as dangerous as Olivia says, confronting Miller could be very risky." "I'll go with them," a new voice said from the doorway. It was Ms. Martinez's husband, Daniel, a tall ex-military man. "If anyone tries to hurt them, they'll have to go through me first." Chin nodded slowly. "All right, but we need a plan. And we need to record everything." 2 days later, we drove to Gloucester. Daniel drove, MS. Martinez sat shotgun, and I sat in the back with Chin. I felt like I was going to be sick. This could be our only chance to get evidence. We found Miller's house, a small place overlooking the harbor. Chin had fitted me with a hidden recording device in my jacket. "Remember," he said as we parked. "You just need to get him to talk about what happened on the boat. Don't push, don't threaten. Just present the facts and see how he reacts." I nodded, trying to suppress my trembling. Daniel and MS. Martinez would go to the door with me, while Chin waited in the car, ready to call the police if necessary. We walked to the door and rang the bell. A long moment passed, and I thought maybe no one was home. But then the door creaked open, and there stood Captain Miller, looking much rougher than the last time I'd seen him, with dark circles under his eyes and a scruffy beard. His eyes landed on me, and I saw recognition dawn, followed by raw fear. "Olivia Morgan," I introduced myself, though I knew he recognized me. "We need to talk about what happened to my parents on the Siren's Call." He tried to slam the door, but Daniel quickly put his foot in the opening. "We don't mean you any harm," Daniel said. His voice calm but firm. "But this girl needs the truth. And I think you need to tell it." Miller looked at us, then over our shoulders as if checking if anyone else was watching. Finally, he opened the door. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I don't know what I can do for you." We entered a small, cluttered living room, littered with empty liquor bottles. Miller sank into an old armchair, gesturing for us to sit on the sofa opposite him. "I know about your conversation with Eleanor," I said, getting straight to the point. "I heard everything. About her paying you, about how she pushed my parents off the boat, about the bodies washing ashore." Miller's face turned white. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. But his hands were visibly shaking. "Mr. Miller," Ms. Martinez said, her voice gentle, "we're not the police. We just want the truth. Olivia needs to know what happened to her parents. And I think you need to tell it for your own sake." Miller stared at the floor, then suddenly stood up. His eyes were wild with panic. I thought he was going to run, but instead, he went to a drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Pouring a full glass, he downed it in one gulp, then turned back to us. "I can't live with it anymore," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The nightmares. I see them every night. Their faces as they went into the water." I clenched my fists, feeling the hidden recorder in my jacket pocket. He was confessing. This was really happening. "Tell me exactly what happened that night," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Miller sank back down, as if all the strength had drained from his body. "It was supposed to be just a boat trip. Eleanor paid me $100,000 to take the boat to a certain area and look away. She said she just wanted to talk privately with your parents." Daniel and Ms. Martinez sat silently, letting me lead the conversation. "But she didn't just talk," I urged. Miller shook his head, his eyes distant. "I'd had a bit to drink. Eleanor insisted we have champagne to celebrate their new deal. I was in the cabin, deliberately not on deck like she'd asked. But I heard shouting." He paused, swallowing hard. "I ran up and saw your mother in the water, trying to swim back to the boat. Your father was gone. Eleanor was standing at the rail, looking down. When your mother reached for us." "Eleanor." His voice broke. Eleanor grabbed a long boat hook and pushed her away, saying, "Don't make this difficult, Claire." Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself to keep listening. I needed to know everything. I yelled at her, what was she doing, and she turned to me with this look. "I can't describe it. Cold. Calculating." She said, "It's too late. Either you help me and earn your money, or you'll go in after them." He looked down at his hands with disgust. "I did nothing. I just stood there and watched your mother go under. A mess." Martinez put her hand on my shoulder, a comforting squeeze. I felt like a vice was crushing my heart, but I forced myself to continue. "And Max?" I asked. "What happened to my brother?" Miller looked confused. "Max? I don't know anyone named Max. There were only 3 people on that boat that night, your parents and Eleanor. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But Max died in the same accident. Eleanor told me he was on the boat too." Miller shook his head firmly. "No, just the 3 of them. I'm sure of it." I looked at Ms. Martinez and Daniel, my head spinning. "Then what happened to Max?" Suddenly, a phone rang in the room, making us all jump. Miller pulled his phone from his pocket, looked at the screen, and his face contorted in pure terror. "It's her," he whispered. "Eleanor's calling me." Daniel spoke quickly. "Don't answer it." But I had another idea. "No, answer it. Put it on speaker." Miller looked at me, terrified, but after a deep breath, he nodded. He hit the accept button and placed the phone on the table. Thomas, Eleanor's voice filled the room, sending a chill down my spine. "I've been trying to reach you all day." "I am sorry," Miller stammered. "I've been busy." "I'm sure you have," Eleanor said, her voice cold. "Is that why you have 3 strangers in your house?" My heart stopped. How could she know? "I don't know what you mean," Miller said, but his voice trembled. "Don't waste my time," Eleanor snapped. "Your neighbor's security camera is quite useful. I got an alert as soon as they arrived. I assume one of them is our little Olivia, yes." Daniel gestured for us to leave immediately. He quietly pulled out his phone, texting Chin outside in the car. "Miller, listen to me carefully," Eleanor continued. "If you say one word to them about what really happened that night, I'll make sure you're charged as an accomplice to murder. Who do you think they'll believe? An alcoholic captain who took a bribe, or a respected philanthropist caring for her traumatized, orphaned niece?" I could barely breathe. She knew we were here. She was watching us. But then, something strange happened. Miller sat up straighter. A change coming over his face, from fear to resolve. "They already know Eleanor," he said, his voice suddenly firm. "I told them everything. I can't live with it anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and when Eleanor finally spoke, her voice was like ice. "You'll regret this, Thomas." The call ended. "We have to go now," Daniel said, pulling me to my feet. "Right now." "She's on her way here," Miller said, suddenly panicking again. "She won't let us leave." "You need to come with us," Ms. Martinez said, grabbing Miller's arm. "You're not safe here." Miller nodded vigorously, grabbing a jacket and his keys. We hurried out the door, where Chin was already waiting with the car engine running. "I called a friend at state police," Chin said as we jumped into the car. "They're on their way, but they need time." Daniel pulled out of the driveway, but as we reached the end of the street, A black SUV screeched to a halt, blocking our path. "That's her," I whispered, seeing Eleanor step out of the driver's seat. But she wasn't alone. 2 large men emerged with her. "Reverse," Chin ordered. "Reverse and find another way." Daniel threw the car into reverse, but another car had appeared behind us, boxing us in. "We're trapped," Ms. Martinez said, gripping my hand. Eleanor walked towards our car, a cold smile on her lips. She tapped on my window. Daniel hit the button, locking all the doors. "Don't open it," he said. "Olivia," Ella, feigning concern. "You've worried me so much. Everyone's looking for you. Come out so we can talk." "Stay away from her," Daniel called through the closed window. Eleanor sighed, as if we were causing an unnecessary fuss. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "I need to report a kidnapping," she said into the phone. "Yes, my adopted daughter, Olivia Morgan. She's mentally unstable after her parents' death. Some people have taken advantage of her condition and are currently holding her in their car. She's calling the cops," I panicked. "They'll believe her." "Not if we call first," Chin said, already on his own phone. He called his contact in the state police. "Rick? We're here, trapped in the car. Eleanor Pierce has shown up with some guys. She's trying to take the kid." Yes, at Miller's address." Outside, Eleanor had finished her call and was gesturing to one of the men. He moved forward and started banging on the car window. "Just go," Miller said suddenly. "Ram them if you have to." Daniel shook his head. "I can't do that. But I can't sit here and wait for them to break the window either." "I'll go with them," Miller said. "I'll tell them everything. About what I witnessed, what Eleanor did. We can't leave you, MS." Martinez protested. "Someone has to pay for what happened," Miller said, his voice firm. "I deserve to pay for not saving them. But she deserves it more." Before anyone could stop him, Miller opened the car door and stepped out. "Thomas," Eleanor called, a surprised look on her face. "What are you doing?" "The right thing," he said, walking towards her. Finally doing the right thing. Daniel used the distraction to reverse the car, bumping the vehicle behind us just enough to create space, then swerved around the side and sped off. As we drove away, I looked back and saw Miller standing face to face with Eleanor, his hands slightly raised as if in surrender, but his head held high. It was the last time I ever saw him. We drove straight to the state police barracks, where Chen's friend, Detective Rodriguez, was waiting. I gave them the hidden recorder, and we sat in silence as they listened to it. "This is solid evidence," Rodriguez said after listening. "Not just of the murder, but of her threatening him over the phone. We'll send a unit to Miller's house immediately, but first, we need a formal statement from all of you." For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything. The boat accident, moving in with Eleanor, the trust fund, what I'd overheard in the garden, and the confrontation with Miller. "There's still one thing I don't understand," I told Rodriguez. "My brother, Max Miller, said he wasn't on the boat. So what happened to him?" Rodriguez jotted something down, then left the room. 15 minutes later, he returned with a file. "We found no record of a Max Morgan associated with the boat accident," he said. "In fact, we found no record of a Max Morgan in your family at all." "That's impossible," I whispered. "He's my brother. Eleanor showed me pictures of us together when we were little." "Do you have those pictures?" Rodriguez asked. "No. They're all at Eleanor's house." Rodriguez nodded. "We'll have a search warrant within the hour. We'll look for anything relevant." News came to us in pieces over the next few hours. Eleanor had been brought in for questioning. Miller had been taken into protective custody. Eleanor's house was being searched. And then, late that evening, Rodriguez returned with a bombshell. "We found your medical records in Eleanor's house," he said gently. "Olivia, you don't have a brother named Max." But I remember him," I said, tears welling up. "Eleanor showed me pictures." "We found those pictures," Rodriguez said, placing one in front of me. "They were altered. This is the original." I looked down at the photo, a picture of me around 8 years old, standing alone. In the version Eleanor had shown me, a boy had been standing beside me. "But why?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "Why would she invent a brother for me?" "To reinforce the accident story," Chin answered, understanding dawning. "To make the boat accident story more tragic. But also to distract you from asking too many questions. If you were grieving for your entire family, you'd be less likely to focus on the specifics." "There's also this," Rodriguez said, offering another document. "Your medical records after the accident. Eleanor had doctors prescribe you high doses of anti-anxiety medication and sedatives, strong enough to impair memory and cause confusion. She was drugging me," I whispered. "That's why my memories of the accident and the days after are so hazy." "And why you had memories of a brother who didn't exist," Ms. Martinez said, taking my hand. "That night, I slept in a hotel room, guarded by a state trooper. Ms. Martinez stayed with me." refusing to leave my side for a second. In the weeks that followed, everything happened in a whirlwind. Eleanor was charged with first-degree murder. It was discovered she'd forged several documents to become my guardian, leveraging her connections with a local judge to rush the process. Captain Miller pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact to murder in exchange for a lighter sentence for testifying against Eleanor. He described in detail how Eleanor had planned the murders, how she drugged my parents with sedatives in their champagne before pushing them off the boat while they were disoriented. While the courts sorted out the case, I was placed under the temporary guardianship of Ms. Martinez and her husband. I would inherit my trust fund when I turned 21 as originally intended. A year after the trial, I sat in Ms. Martinez's living room, now my home, watching as Eleanor received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the verdict, I didn't feel joy or triumph, just a profound sadness for all that had been lost, and a sense of relief that justice had finally been served. Do you think I'll be okay? I asked Ms. Martinez as we turned off the TV. She hugged me, a genuine embrace I'd never received from Eleanor. Yes, she said. I think you'll be more than okay. You're stronger and braver than anyone I've ever known. And you're not alone anymore. 3 years later, on my 21st birthday, I gained access to my trust fund. Instead of using it for myself, I established a nonprofit foundation in my parents' names, focused on helping orphan children and protecting them from exploitation. Every year on the anniversary of my parents' deaths, I go to the marina where the sirens call once docked. I let a bouquet of flowers drift out to sea and whisper the goodbyes I never got to say. But now, those goodbyes are no longer tinged with guilt or questions. They had justice, and I, their daughter, was finally free.